So I love that there's a discrepancy between the speed of the countdown video versus the speed that our streaming software gives like a second delay. But I did read today that the increased warming and melting of the polar caps, right, is resulting in slightly longer days by something like 2.3 milliseconds per century.
Interesting.
And that is what I will blame that on. Global warming caused the counts to be wrong on this. So GG, bro. Also the I am this individual thing could be from my computer is probably only a few hundred feet above sea level, but who knows where the streaming software could be. If it's 5,000-6,000 feet above, then time is actually going to move a little bit faster for them because of distance from the center of the Earth's gravity. So like not only cloud economics but also physics. So
I also read.
So are you saying that time is a construct and we are both online and offline right now?
Well, no, now you're talking about quantum mechanics, not necessarily time.
I regret this. I pull back. Let me backpedal.
I also read that we're about to start a Mercury retrograde. So if you want to start getting some astronomy into all that as well, we can just dive fully into the nerd zone.
Honestly, because I figured my Velveeta was also in centigrade, and I tend to like it in Fahrenheit. So, when my Velveeta is in centigrade, man, it's just a bad time for everybody.
Now, I have a really important question. Every time I see our title screen, there are 3 people on the title screen doing various different motions, looking excited or scared about FinOps. I have to ask, which one do we think we are? Each of us.
Ooh, gosh, that's a good question.
One of them was jumping. One of them kind of had a hurrah, like hero pose, and one I think was doing Running Man. I'm not quite sure what they were doing. It looked like Running Man.
I'll give myself the Running Man. I'll go ahead and take that one.
I will take the afraid one, given that we just talked about Mercury retrograde, and I regret it every time it comes up in conversation.
Then I'll take the one jumping for joy.
So I'm going to need someone to explain to me about Mercury and retrograde.
I don't know,
because I understand orbital mechanics.
Problems on is what it is.
Like I said, I understand orbital mechanics, and I understand how little influence Mercury has gravitationally on anything.
Because it's tiny and fast. Like me.
It's not really that. Is it fast, or is it just close to the central point of the solar system's gravity?
It's both.
Speaking as somebody who does believe in Mercury retrograde, I think there is a certain amount of desire to not own up to one's own mess and chaos and just blame it on something exterior.
So yeah, hey, sorry that I raised our AWS bill by 400% last month. The
Mercury was in retrograde.
Yeah, the Pleiades were in Fahrenheit, and so that's why. Sorry, my bad. But just tell it to AWS. I'm sure they'll give us a credit. Oh, speaking of, it is the first day of Prime Day, everybody. So take the savings that you will get from talking to us or listening to us, and let's use that for some from Prime Day. I haven't actually looked. What's everyone's big? What's your Prime Day kind of grab? What is the thing that you want or excited about the most for Prime Day today? What is the thing you've been holding off to get until Prime Day?
I buy books that generally have very high licensing fees. So like Star Trek books, like Dungeons and Dragons books, other like kind of gaming stuff where I know the margin isn't good on smaller stores. So I just get them at discounts on things like Prime Day and Cyber Monday and stuff, because then the corp that I need stuff from but don't super support, and then I get the cheapest thing from them while also getting the stuff that I want to have a bigger margin or a bigger price point, and I get those from smaller stores.
Okay. How about you, Jesse?
I have to admit, I don't shop Prime Day. I have not been paying any attention to it. I know that it exists because I keep getting targeted ads with Megan Thee Stallion in them. For me, saying that I should shop.
How do you ignore something with Megan Thee Stallion on it? Like, come on, what?
She's physically everywhere.
She is. Amazing. She really is. Yeah.
God,
kudos to her for getting that Amazon money. I don't know what. Like, I know that Amazon. I know Prime Day is a thing, but like, is it just discounts broadly across everything on Amazon?
It is discounts.
It's Cyber Monday.
It's discounts for selected items typically, right?
Okay.
But you know, there's so many things, right? That it could be a lot of stuff. But
also Kindles and Fires.
Yeah.
Are a great time to great thing to get right now.
For me,
it's real cheap.
For me, it's skincare and moisturizers, right? You can get 30 to 50% off of some of these retinols and like hyaluronic acid and stuff like that. Got to holler at it, man. Some of the deals are really good on that. Speaking of which, I actually need to look. Because they've got Strivectin on sale. They got Intense Moisturizer Cream, which I love. So the Strivectin SC Advanced Plus for eye wrinkles, good stuff. That's 25% off. Clinique has got the auto-plenishing hydrator for 30% off. Neutrogena Retinol Face Moisturizer is 53% off, right? And the Neutrogena Retinol Regenerative Cream, 39% off. So like, holler at some of these. Like so much of the Neutrogena Retinol stuff is like 50% off. So it's a good time to holler at it. Collagen stuff is fine. Strivectin stuff is, like I said, it's on sale. Neutrogena's got stuff on sale. And the Kiehl's Ultra Face Cream also is on sale. It's like 30% off. So they don't have like Fresh. They don't have like any of the Ole Henriksen or the Algenist stuff on sale. But what are you gonna do? I already have allergic to those anyway. So
I think I've hit the point where I've bought enough stuff that everything that I want no longer goes on sale or is old or is not a thing I want anymore. I think I'm there.
There's always time for face care, Amy.
Do you think Amazon gives its employees Prime accounts, or do you think that's something that they have to pay money
So
back
I know this. You have to pay money. You get a discount on your Prime account.
Okay.
But it's only a discount. You still have to buy it. So actually Prime Day is interesting because now, so I'm not sure if everyone's familiar. If you have enterprise support, you get a TAM and stuff like that, but you also get support for like the big events like this. And I can't remember what it's called. They had an acronym for it, but essentially like events like the Super Bowl or a launch or like, hey, we're going to be on Good Morning America, and we're going to like something that a scheduled time where like big things are going to happen, right? The biggest one of them all, right, is Prime Day for Amazon, right? And so I actually worked they call it the War Room, and I don't like necessarily calling it the War Room, but the control center for Prime Day at Amazon, and it is intense. It is intense, but it's quiet, right? It is dead quiet. There's not a lot of talking, but it's so intense. And so I worked a shift there for support, and I actually watched what I believe was someone's career end on during one of these calls.
Oh, no.
Because you can be a lot of things, but you can't be confidently wrong. And someone had there was a problem. Someone had said they had done something so this thing had been done, and then it turns out in the checklist it hadn't been done. And whoever was running it, and so it was like an L10 who was running the event, right? And it said, well, actually it looks like this and this and this, right? And he turned to somebody and said something like off the mic, because I was watching this happen, right? The person who was there was on a call, not in the room, right? Turned to some L8 who left the room, right? That person all of a sudden dropped off the call. And then like 5 minutes later, somebody came back on the call, apparently with the same title as the person who had been on the call before. And I never heard from that person again. Didn't see them in Chime, never saw them back again. I was like,
they got buried, man. That's the only logical conclusion I can think of.
So
They
Getting
gone.
kicked
so
out
yeah,
of the parking lot.
so
Oh
so
no.
yeah, so if you're ever in the Prime Day control center room, hey, just be honest about what you didn't get done. So speaking of Amazon and saving money, today's topic, like as a good segue, I go me. Today's topic, right, is going to be prepaid commitments, right? And so, okay, so what? Yeah, so Tim, what are prepaid commitments? Well, I'm going to kick that off to Amy. Amy, what is a prepaid commitment?
I'm sorry. I'm reeling from the speed in which we like. I saw a guy disappear, and now we're going to talk about prepaid commitments.
No, I kick it to you, Amy. So, but you can't be confidently wrong on this. Otherwise, maybe you just disappear off the call, and then like nobody hears from you again.
A prepaid commitment is if you're smart about it, getting a discount for purchasing usually an instance or some kind of virtual machine for X amount of time. That contract limit is usually bought in things of like 3 or 6 months, so you can get it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that sort of thing. Kind of in like a very common situation is a reserved instance. It's usually what we talked about, but also can be a prepaid commitment where you run a bunch of machines on AWS and you get a pretty relatively fat discount. I don't even know if the discounts are even that good anymore. I haven't seen a contract in a couple of years. So where they give you a percentage or some other compensation for saying that you're going to use X number of machines at this amount of capacity for this amount of time. I think it's 1 year at a time. 1 to 3.
1 to 3. Typically.
If anything, I'm not confidently wrong about it.
And I think I just want to add to that too, is that like the name prepaid is kind of like they can be prepaid. They don't necessarily have to be prepaid. You can commit to paying them over time and they'll be added to your bill. You will get the discount for their usage based on that, but you don't actually have to pay them ahead of time. You just get a better discount if you pay ahead of time, but you're still committed. You are still going to owe that money, right? Whether you use it or not.
Yeah.
And
I feel like it's also worth mentioning too that we talked briefly about like administrative effort versus engineering effort in one of our previous conversations. And when we talk about like prepaid commitments, this is one of the big administrative effort levers. Like if you are looking for something that it is a relatively easy way to start saving money, prepaid commitments are likely the first place that you should be looking.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason I like the ease of that is because it takes a lot of pressure off, right, on the engineers. We need to make a score real quick of some money savings. Well, great. Have finance. Either finance can give you a partial payment and then some discounts, or we have the cash deal all ahead, or we could just commit to spending this over a year, right? And that's a quick win, like if you need a quick win. But it doesn't mean there is no engineering input on this whatsoever, because you need to get a good idea of what you should be committing to, right? Now, Amazon, Microsoft, Google have decent recommendations, right? I say decent because they're not bad, right? They're not terrible for sure. Are they the most accurate? No, right? Based on the usage, they look at what your current usage is and just kind of say, okay, this is where you could save the most money doing this, and that's not a bad idea, right? But what they don't do is they don't forecast well, right? And to be honest, most people don't either, right? So to take that into consideration when we're talking about like, hey, this is kind of what we need to commit to, what we should commit to, right? The thing that I always like to caution people about is like, and find again, this is going to be a finance issue. Is like, when do you buy? How much do you buy? How much did you prepay? Or is this what you want to commit to? Right now, there's a lot of things like, okay, yeah, if you need to sign something right away, right? There's going to be the pressure to lock in the most discount, which is going to be the longest commitment, right? But you have to look at it holistically, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to be using this same type of compute, this same style of compute? Are we going to be on EC2 for 3 years straight, right? before we commit. Now, it's gotten easier since savings plans came out. I think they came out in 2019. I think is when they first launched fully. Right? Was it?
Or
2018 or
18.
2019, I can't remember. Because before that, you used to have to reserve a specific instance, right, or instance family. And then it became a little bit more difficult when people started doing Lambda and Fargate and things like that. So they just started, now you can just buy compute hours on whatever, which becomes a little bit easier to manage. Now, the flip side of that was you used to be able to sell your reservations on a marketplace and you'd get a little bit of your money back. Can't really do that with savings plans. So once you're committed, but you get to use it however you want to, and to some extent wherever you want to. But so what are some of the, like, talk me out of a prepaid commitment, Jesse? Why shouldn't I do it?
It really depends on I mean, you said this, I'll dive deeper into it, which is like, it really depends on what you're ultimately going to be looking at in terms of your workload in the upcoming year, 6 months to a year. For example, if you've got a major workload that's running in production that is sort of steady state, this is the way things are, we are not going to be making any major architectural changes to this workload for the foreseeable future, that's an easy place to keep to purchase prepaid commitments and keep everything as is. But a case where you wouldn't want to do prepaid commitments is if you are in the process of re-architecting that workload and you think maybe in the next 3 to 6 months you are going to move it from one specific compute type to another, or maybe you're going to move it from containers on instances to Lambda or to some other major architectural shift that is going to mean that you don't know which type of services you are going to be using once you've made that architectural shift. Like if you are not going to be using if you're not going to be using the workload and using the hours that you paid for, at least up to the break-even period of the prepaid commitment, then it's not worth purchasing the prepaid commitment. And the break-even period is usually, I think it's like 2/3 or 3/4 of whatever the time period is. So like if it's a 1-year prepaid commitment, I think it's like 7-ish months about. If you know the workload's going to be staying as is for at least 7 months, it's worth buying the commitment. Because even if you change it after 7 months, you've still got that discounted spend. You're still kind of breaking even. But if you know it's going to be changing sooner than that, it's absolutely not worth buying a prepaid commitment.
So Amy, also so talk to me about, like, if I buy, for example, we'll say with AWS, right? If I buy, savings plans, right? But I also use like SageMaker and RDS, is that all the same? Like talk to me about some of the differences, how those go.
So these types of commitments have a tendency to block certain service types together. So if you're getting discounts, you're just getting discounts on instances, not necessarily on data transfers, stuff like that. So when you go through your negotiation, you want to make sure that you are covering the services that you actually use for to get the kinds of discounts that are most applicable to your workload. If you are running SageMaker or any kind of other managed service product, those are considered a different thing to instances and the supporting products for those. So you want to make sure that if you have a very high SageMaker or some other big kind of
like RDS
compute,
and Elasticsearch or OpenSearch,
even like Lambdas and stuff. If you have a lot of Lambda use, you want to collect all. Those services are considered to be separate, so you can't put a flat percentage discount on all of them. They are usually applied differently. You want to be very sure about where your discounts are actually applied to.
And I think that's particularly important. Like now when we're talking about if everyone's switching to like, AI and things like that, like if you are buying EC2 savings plans, right? For EC2 instances or compute savings plans, right? But you're planning on switching over to using a lot of like SageMaker for some of your data analytics, machine learning, and stuff like that. If you're planning on using OpenSearch for some of the vector database kind of stuff like that, or any of the other services like RDS and other big data services, they're not all the same, right? So when you talk about my commitment and how long when I'm forecasting, it's like you really have to be smart about how you're going to consume compute, right? The widest swath is cut is with the compute savings plan. So it's going to be Fargate, it's going to be Lambda, any instance type, any tenancy, any operating system, anything like that, right?
Because at that
EC2.
point,
Go ahead.
sorry, at that point, if you do like a compute savings plan, you're just saying I'm going to be running some amount of compute on these services, no matter what instance type it is,
Right.
for this amount of time.
Yeah, but again, it's only going to be EC2 compute, and it's only going to be EC2, and it's only going to be compute, right? So savings plans don't cover anything else associated, no VPC, no, like you said, no data transfer, stuff like that. Now you can get like you can get like the most, I think the biggest discount, something like 72%, and that's if you do like a 3-year prepaid. I think that's going to be your biggest discount. Now, go ahead.
This may be what you were about to say, and I'm curious for your thoughts, Tim, because I know you have thoughts on long-standing purchases of prepaid commitments and hardware. So I'm curious for your thoughts on, buying a sort of or prepaying for like a 3-year commitment versus buying infra.
So I'm usually going to be a hard no on prepaying for 3 years of savings plans, right? I can see a year, honestly, and it makes a lot of sense. But the reason I don't like 3 years is because over 3 years, I know I'm going to be using this workload for 3 years or kind of using this compute. I am committed to spending this much a month, right? For 3 years, right? Why would I commit to a 3-year OpEx? And when I can instead make a CapEx for the cost of 1 year and then own what I'm going to have and use all the compute I want to, right? And then not only that, but then at the end, or if I have problems in the middle, I can sell hardware. I can sell space in that hardware. And I don't. And the other thing I think is very, very important to note. This is the thing that a lot of people the first time around need to understand. At least the AWS. Google, you can do this, but you can't with AWS. Is buying a reservation does not guarantee capacity. It is not a capacity reservation on AWS. It is a price reservation. You can have as many EC2 savings plans as you want to. You can have as many, compute savings plans. It does not mean you're going to be able to spin up your C7G instance whenever you want to, because you are still limited by capacity, no matter how much you reserve. Okay. Now, like I said, I know with Google, you can reserve instances and you as well as some prepaid commitments as well. I don't know if you can reserve capacity on Azure. So if anybody is an Azure specialist out there can confirm that, but you can do reservations. And then ideally, like I said, you want to look at this holistic view, right? Compute savings plans are a lever you can pull, but how much is it going to cost me? How much flexibility do I have? And in the end, how much is it worth to me, right? And I like to think that if I'm going to spend something for 3 years, I would rather take 1 year of that, buy the hardware, have access to it whenever I want to, right? And then if I need some excess capacity in AWS, then I'm going to buy me like a 1-year compute savings plan, right? And that way, if I can, I know I'm going to probably run over at least as much. My dev environment's going to be here, or I know I have some workloads that are always going to run in here. That's when I get a compute savings plan. I'm going to pay that ahead of time, just like it's a CapEx, right? And then use it as I need it, right? And if you blend stuff that way, that's going to be your biggest ROI. That's going to be your biggest savings. And then you have purchased assets, and then you can write off the depreciation of those assets on your taxes and save even more money if you wanted to.
I'll also add really quick, this is why it's so important to gather all of that cost and spend data in one central location so that you are able to have these conversations about forecasting, knowing what your spend has been, and from that data, forecasting what your spend potentially is going to be. Because if you don't have if you don't have visibility into your spend data, if you're not looking at that accurately, there's no way you're going to be able to accurately forecast and purchase a reservation that's going to save you money in a confident way.
And I need to reiterate that this is not a technical decision you're making. This is a business decision you're making. So your business strategy, your forecasting, where I'm going to be, what does my 3-year strategy look like, plays very much into this. And I think the other thing that we've kind of barely touched on that we really need to talk about are private pricing agreements, and formerly known as EDPs, right? Because these are also prepaid commitments that can save you a lot of money across the board on variety or any of service and things like that. But these are not easy to forecast, and they are quite binding to make. And this is something that when you do these types of agreements, and if you have an account manager, they're gonna be telling you all about how these are great. They're gonna be like, hey, you should do this. They're gonna be pitching enterprise support to you. They're gonna be pitching all this other stuff to you like that. And for a lot of folks who are all in on a cloud provider, it's not a bad way to save money, right? But as the three of us who have negotiated billions of dollars worth of contracts at this point, it is quite a lot to consider. There's a lot of legalese. There's a lot of things you need to understand about your current use, your projected future use, and where you have leverage. I can also say that the customer has lost a lot of leverage over the past few years with these contract negotiations. There used to be a lot more levers you could pull to save money, and now there are a lot fewer. AWS has standardized these private pricing agreements a lot more. That said, still have seen the sausage is made. So when I tell you some of the margin on some of these services, right, it is wild how much you can actually get discounts for on some of these things, like network transfer for S3 for numbers of requests. And you can get very granular with some of these things. Like I know that if I have, I'm going to be using WAF a ton, right? WAF a ton, right? And I know that these, price per request or whatever is going to be kicking me in the tail. I can negotiate those down to some extent. So you can be kind of granular with some of these things where it makes sense to you. But again, you really have to have a good understanding of your current and your projected future usage. And so when we're talking about that, if you don't have a dedicated FinOps team, right, or some people that are really, really good at this, I highly suggest you at least get someone to look over your bill, right, and look over the proposed contract that AWS will send you. And they will send you a proposed contract that this is what we think you should get. Please have someone look that over if you're really not in there. There are companies that will help you with that. But the last thing you want to do is bite off more than you can chew cost-wise, because you're looking at that discount. You're not looking at what you're actually committing to spend.
Now, I'm curious. We've talked about prepaid commitments being a sort of administrative effort thing. If you're looking at only a handful of prepaid commitments within one service or within one cloud service provider, it's relatively easy to manage. This is something that can be managed by an individual or possibly a small team. But as you start to grow an organization and talk maybe about a large enterprise that is managing prepaid commitments across dozens of teams, dozens of product lines, multiple different types of prepaid commitments, possibly on top of some sort of private pricing, as we're talking about, it starts to become a lot. It can become very, very unwieldy for an individual or even a team to manage. So I'm curious for both of your thoughts on some of the tooling and service providers that have popped up that will basically say, for a percentage of that discount, we will manage all of your reservations for you.
Oh yeah, arbitrage is a big thing, especially among MSPs, right? They look at that, and there was one tool that a lot of them were co-opting. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically just literally just some person who wrote a tool that does reserved instance arbitrage, right? And it is gambling for sure. It is absolutely gambling, right? But it keeps you from realizing some percentage of a discount without actually having to make the commitment, because the commitment is made as a pool, right? But even within that, even without using specific arbitrage as a third-party service, you can still do arbitrage within an org, right? So if I buy reservations or buy savings plans within an org, I can use them for other accounts underneath that org, right? And so I buy at the org level, right? And then I do arbitrage within for these other organizations. So if I'm a reseller of stuff, I will absolutely do some arbitrage, right? There is risk in that though, right? Because like I've already committed to paying whether they get used or not. So you want to be very smart about that. You want to make sure that you get your margin on these things, and you're going to want to make sure kind of that you under commit enough to make sure it gets used, but not so much that you don't get penalized. I feel like and it's my understanding that as they've gone away from specific reserved instances, and now it's kind of compute savings plan, EC instant savings plan, arbitrage is a little bit harder. I think it still makes a lot of sense for like RDS for sure. And there's a lot of folks that have RDS instances that they're going to need to just, keep in perpetuity. So it's not a bad idea to go for that. But again, if I am going to, we get into this debate on, do I want to rely on arbitrage for savings for reserve instances? Or do maybe I just want to buy some stuff, or maybe do I just need to rewrite for spot instead, right? Because there's no amount. So if I can run my workloads in spot, there's no amount of reserved instances that's going to save me more money. No, it's not happening, right? Spot is always going to be cheaper. So if I'm kind of treating like my availability to do these things versus on demand, and I don't need to keep them forever, which is why I don't want to commit to the reservation, even if I'm paying monthly, I'm going to start looking at something I want to do on spot and save more money.
Amy, anything you want to add to that?
No, just with a bit of warning that the companies we've seen that have been able to highly optimize spot, they did some pretty aggressive things as far as being able to determine what those needs were and be able to do this programmatically so that it automatically buys and automatically drops and what have you. And then in order to be able to maximize that savings, a lot of organizations aren't there and they do not have the resources to be able to do that kind of essentially day trading of machines, right? So just it is where you can get the deepest discount. But when we were talking about engineering versus administrative kind of effort. That's kind of an effort that you have to keep an eye out for.
Oh, actually, so let me get a little update real quick. So effective January 15th of this year, AWS has a policy change that bans customers from reselling their discounted reserved instances.
Oh.
There's no longer will be a viable option to resell unused RI capacity through the marketplace or third-party providers, right? And this became, like I said, this became effective on January 15th of this year.
Why?
Are they incentivizing customers to move to do something else or move to something else?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They want to put them on compute savings plans, which can't be resold.
That makes sense. That's definitely one way to get them to move off of reserved instances and onto savings plans.
That's a way to get them to move somewhere else too. The reason why I asked because Tim was asking about Azure reserved instances earlier, and I don't know about like prepaid plans, but they have an RI marketplace where you can resell the RIs that you have. So it's
real quick. The company that did a lot of the arbitrage was a company called Prequantix. That was who they were. And so I haven't seen much out of them since this, but it is that is something I would like to put out. Like who was doing arbitrage or who was engaging in arbitrage before that now, like what are you doing since then? And that's something I haven't checked. So I would love to hear about that for anyone who has been doing that. What you got? But yeah, so that definitely throws, and like I said, I was never much into, I didn't really trust arbitrage as much, because it's like, if you're a reseller, it makes sense, but if you're an individual customer, it doesn't. Just buy your own stuff and be in charge of your own stuff. But
Yeah.
but so that is an interesting change as of this year. Because if there's anything that AWS really is concerned about, it's that they're really just operating by the skin of their teeth. So they absolutely needed to make sure that no one was getting these discounts, because and this is me being absolutely sarcastic. Like, this is just just trying to.
I will say that has been always one of the most fascinating things for me, to see where Amazon or where AWS is willing to provide deeper discounts from a business analyst perspective, to see where are they making enough, where is AWS making enough margins that they can afford to have deeper discounts on some of these services.
So the real answer is they're making a lot of margin on everything. Some less than others, but like, again, having seen what the discounts they were running on network egress, I know that 9 cents a gig is nothing but pure margin.
Okay, so I have a question. Because we've seen portfolios often use their pulled companies to get larger contracts. So that they can get better discounts, because you have you're helping out about 6 small startups. They all don't by themselves have enough usage in order to warrant one of those contracts, but all of them at the same time, and then you can do that and kind of help these startups get off the ground. Does that count, or towards the word you just said that I can't pronounce? Or
you mean arbitrage?
Yeah. Or is that likely constructed in a way that it's considered internal to an organization?
That was a long question, and I have ADHD. Can you give me a shorter version of that question?
You have a bunch of baby companies. They're all on your contract. Does that count?
Okay, so you're essentially talking about like as an org or as a reseller?
As a portfolio company, and you pulled a contract or a partnership with a bunch of tiny companies.
Okay, so like, in the end, right? It says the verbiage that I read, that the customers can no longer resell their instance. So you can distribute the use of reservations and compute savings plans within an org, right?
Okay.
But you cannot transfer them outside of the org.
Okay.
Now,
interesting.
As to the terms of services, whether I can sell, quote unquote, that capacity within an org or whatever, I don't know. I'm going to be honest about that, and that's something I'll have to look at. But if this is one of those things where I would be this is one of the things where if I were a company, I would hire a lawyer and have them look at that and see what I could do. And what I am not is a lawyer.
Yep.
So this is when we turn to somebody who has more specific experience in this area and lean on them and trust them.
Yeah.
You would think with just our general vibe, one of us would know a lawyer.
Oh, no. I know lawyers, but I am not one. So
yeah. We should have someone who is a lawyer in tech stuff come on and tell us what horrible crimes we've committed on this podcast.
And I'm sure we committed a lot of horrible crimes, if we're being honest. So it's like,
well, not in general.
But I mean, we haven't committed them on this podcast. So
okay.
Oh yeah. They have been committed in general at some point, but not by us, obviously.
Statistically speaking,
we don't commit crimes. We are crime free.
That's the soundbite for this episode.
Radio.
Well, that's the tagline. We are crime free.
Yeah.
So I think it is important to note, though, going back to this has been the private pricing agreements. Like, not only do you want to have someone who's really good, who has some experience at like analyzing your forecasting and using stuff like that, we really want to be having our corporate lawyers look at these commitments, especially like what happens if you miss the commitment, anything like that. Like, there was a huge number of companies during the pandemics who had during the height of the pandemic and the lockdown who had committed contracts who were scrambling to renegotiate them. And AWS was happy to let them do it because AWS is counting on this commitment when they're making their numbers. And if these companies are going, no one can pay them because they get shut down or have to reduce their services or something like that, AWS is not going to get that money. And they're now going to be looking at like the people who they told they were going to make this money, right? And so, so there are some conditions under which you can renegotiate, but you better be real sure on those. So don't just have somebody who knows AWS and is good at predicting forecasting. Please have your lawyers look this over, or if you don't have one, get one before you sign a contract with AWS. Because one thing AWS definitely has is lawyers.
Or any contract.
Yeah.
Any business contract, get a lawyer.
This is also why the culture side of FinOps is so important, because what we were describing today requires conversations between engineering, leadership, finance. You want to have a good relationship with your technical account manager. You want to have a good relationship with your account manager. You want to be able to have open and honest and fruitful conversations with all these different people in their different specialty areas so that you can make an informed decision about your business.
Yeah. And the other thing to note too is that your account teams are going to, they're going to be helpful, but understand that there's a bit of a conflict of interest for them in this. Like your sales, your sales representative there, your account manager is trying to make that money on that contract, right? Is going to want you to sign something a little bit bigger because they get paid a little more, and that's okay, right? But understand that as for whatever their intentions may be, good as they are, there's still that pressure, if not by them, by the people they report to try and get a bigger contract, right? But at what cost, right? What is this commitment going to cost me in the end? And that's the thing that you always got to hold out, right? They say you got to spend money to save money, but how much money do you have to spend? And is it worth it? Right. And that's the thing that we talk about, like with FinOps and the cloud economics is like, it's not that you save money, is like, is it worth it? Am I getting the most out of my dollar that I can? The other thing that I really like too, and is the thing that I love doing, is when the time to start talking to the other cloud providers is when I have maybe about, a year left of my commitment. And I start hitting up the Google representative or the Azure person, or if I'm one of those, I start hitting up AWS. Like, hey, I'm the last year of my commitment. What have you got? Especially if you've already hit your commitment, right? If you're 2 years in, you've already hit your commitment, you can get out of the contract at any point, kind of at that point, because I've already paid my commitment. Like now it's time to start shopping around and see what I can get. Maybe, obviously, it's not going to be hard for you to move everything, but if I can move some services over, so get some leverage. Get some leverage on those things, and when you can negotiate and see what you can do. Like I said, rates are usually going to be not negotiable, but credits are always negotiable, right? You can get credits for a lot of stuff as part of a price agreement. So,
I think that's one of the things that I was always fascinating to me in conversations about prepaid commitments and private pricing. There's a broader question of, yes, obviously you want to save money to some amount or want to get good business value out of the cloud, but what do you ultimately want? Because in some cases, maybe we're moving a bunch of stuff into machine learning and AI, and we want to be able to do that effectively and get good business value out of that. Prepaid commitments can help with that, but you could also do credits. You may be also able to negotiate something for discounts or vouchers for training for AWS services in the AI ML space. There's opportunities to have conversations about what are you ultimately trying to accomplish. And you may not be able to get all of those things, but if you at least have an understanding of like, this is the checklist of things that we ultimately want, that can help you in your negotiations.
And yeah, I think it's important to know right now, the only thing I really see as far as, savings plans for anything involved with AI ML, aside from your standard compute stuff, is SageMaker, right? So I'm not saying that's all there is, but you really have to be kind of, like if I'm planning on making a move or making a switch, I can't really rely just on, just on like, oh, I've got a savings plans for this, right? you may have to look at getting an overall private pricing, part of your private pricing agreement if you have one, like, hey, I'm planning on using this, right? So I'm going to get an overall discount of whatever percentage on any of the services I get, so I can get part of that percentage. The other thing too is like I can say, hey, I'm negotiating this. I want to have some adoption credits. I want to have some, like some test credits. I want to have some, like, I'm going to build this workload on this. I know I have this discount on this, but I want to get, maybe some credits specifically around the use of these services, right? Those are levers you can pull, especially with the competition that AWS has in the AI marketplace right now. They will definitely be willing to get more users on the platform that are willing to talk about them. Oh, that is the other thing that I need to talk about private pricing agreements. If you can get a lot more out of them if you are willing to tell people that you use AWS and that you're like going to get their stories like that. If they can use your logo, if they can put you on stage, stuff like that, you can get a little bit more stuff out of it. Like, again, that publicity is always worth something.
The best thing about co-marketing departments is that agreements is that now every department wants in on this agreement. So you have way more buy-in at whatever vendor you're at. If you're willing, it's like, I'm willing to go on stage and co-present with you at a bunch of these like different meetups and conferences and sales calls and stuff. And if you're willing to put a person to do that, because that's one of the things that they really want.
Yeah. Oh, and then you can also leverage for an EBC. And EBCs are kind of fun. Executive briefing conference convention, executive briefing center is what they call it. So you can get, AWS literally has an entire building dedicated just to bringing people into and give them the old razzle dazzle with the art of the possible. They take you on a tour in Seattle of the domes.
Real tech bubble on
which
cloud.
Which is the domes, if you haven't seen them, and the Ghost Store, right? Which the Ghost Store was a lot cooler like 3-4 years ago. Now it's kind of everyone's gone to a place where I can just walk in and walk out, and then they pay with the phone. But like the domes, it's like, it's like a little tropical rainforest inside some domes in Seattle. It's kind of cool. It's technically an AWS office. It's also hot. Like, I don't think people realize, like, oh, you go see the domes. Like, no, bro, you're going to a tropical rainforest. You're going to sweat. But the EBC is really cool to see kind of new technologies, talk to the product teams and stuff like that. But also, when I'm going to do that is before I sign a contract or sign it, so that way I can talk to the people in the services that I'm really going to be using and see if it's going to be right for me or what my appetite is for consuming it. Because again, it's all about what I'm planning to use and that what value I'm going to get out of it. And so if they're going to roll out the red carpet for you and really show you what they've got, and it's something that's appealing to you, that's going to make good business sense for you to use, and yeah, it makes sense to add that as part of your private pricing agreement. If it doesn't, now you have leverage. So we just got a few minutes left. Amy, what else? Is there anything else you want to add to about some of these, either cautionary tales or some tips for success with committed use discounts or anything like that?
To buy myself some time, Amy, you had mentioned something about infra versus tools versus software.
I will sell for you. This goes part into the different types of ways your discounts get applied, but also having a very full awareness of the things that you're actually paying money on. Just like you can do this for hardware, if you have you require a lot of licenses for a very specific type of software, you can also use similar information to go to your vendor and say, I need these many licenses for this long. What's the bulk rate I can get on these? What kind of support can I get on them, et cetera, et cetera. Software companies also love putting logos on stuff if you want to be one of those people. A lot of them will not be able to bring you your own building the way Amazon does, but you will get an extremely nice dinner and flown out to a very fancy place and you won't even have to talk to any of their engineers in whatever basement that they work out of.
I have so many more follow-up questions, but I think in the interest of time, I'll save them. Amy, blink twice if everything is okay.
It was a thing that happened when they were doing the publicity tour for The Martian. For people who don't know, I used to work at Ames Research Center. The Palladium Center, the part of the movie that Donald Glover is in our basement. It's not a nice place. It's not a fancy place. It's just a place with racks and racks and racks of computers. That's what it is. And people who were at some centers for the movie were flown out and they got a hobnob and they got all these parties, and we were given like 3 theaters worth of tickets, and we can go if we clocked out and then went to the movie. And our boiler at that point had been broken for 3 months.
Oof.
They only need to keep the temperature under a number in a federal data center, not over.
I mean, one would think that the racks and racks and racks of computers would keep you nice and warm.
That's how cold it was in that building. That's how many machines were in that building. It's so cold.
Wow.
Jesse, how about you? Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, if you take away nothing else, know your worth in terms of your business. Know where your money's going, so that you know how to forecast it. And this isn't something that you need to do yourself. Again, talk to your finance team, talk to your operations people, talk to your business analytics people, get them involved, because this is something they're already doing for the business in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully already doing for the business in some way, shape, or form. And if not, they should be, and take it from there. Use data to make data-driven decisions. That's the only place you'll be able to start and make good decisions off this information.
My only final thought is that going to be, if I'm going to commit to spend something, you got to remember, it will always be cheaper for me to buy it than to not even lease it, right? Than to reserve time on something I don't own. Always going to be cheaper, even if you have to buy the data center people, right, and lease it. But this is not 2008. Like, you can buy hardware and stick it in a data center as a managed service for everything else, and it will still be cheaper. And you will still have assets you can sell, right? So again, it's a holistic business decision. It doesn't make sense for a lot of orgs to do that, but it's worth looking at to see if it makes sense for you before you go and do a long-term commitment to give AWS your money, or Google your money, or Azure your money. And I don't know if anybody ever willingly commits to giving Oracle their money, but that too. So with that, oh yes, please get a lawyer. Always.
Always get a lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
Get 2, just in case. High availability lawyers. All right, y'all. That's all we had for this week. We'll come up with a show topic and we'll post it up for next week for sure. But look out for that. And again, thanks for joining. If you have any complaints, gripes, accolades, questions like that, hit us up on the socials. I think Jesse's going to be releasing a calendar soon of tastefully posed like kitchen shots.
I'm sorry. It's going to be me and the various different planets and astronomy concepts month by month.
There's only 8 planets, my friend.
Let me have this one thing too.
All right, y'all. Have a happy Tuesday. We'll see you later.